very similar picture here that it paints, very similar to the New Zealand US dollar. However, we can see here there is a point of interest that right here we can see the 3-day has crossed over the 8-day predicted moving average from Vantage Point. So that is certainly worth a look. Now, Australia US, again, very high correlation to both equities and commodities. So looking at the short-term picture here from Vantage Point, we can see that we very clearly have a crossover to the upside, and this took place a few days, actually several days ago. So this suggests that it's going to go higher. Now, looking at the medium-term outlook from Vantage Point, we have a crossover there also. So this is, again, the short and the medium term. The next few days, this could last a couple of days, maybe a week, that it's going to move higher. Now, we're going to go into the long-term indicator here from Vantage Point, and we can see that the long-term indicator from Vantage Point, the crossover, which is Vantage Point's 6-day, predicted 6-day exponential moving average, crossing over a standard 15-day simple moving average, is not at all confirming that Australia US is moving higher. So this is a very, very strong point here that we have to take into consideration. Now, if we had the short, medium, and long-term crossing over to the upside, that would put pressure on the triple EMA to make its cross, but again, that's not happening. So what we can do now here is we can do the correlation, because the correlation is actually very high using the other markets. We can see here that with this medium-term crossover, now looking at the gold contracts from Vantage Point, we're going to put this on, we're going to hit the long-term crossover on both, because I think that is one of the best when we're using the crossovers based around the predicted crossover versus the simple moving average. The long term is better than the short and the medium term, in my opinion. So looking at this, we can see with the gold contracts on the long term have not made the crossover to the upside, and neither has Australia US. Very important to take this into consideration, that the overall bigger picture here is there is considerable downside pressure still on Australia US. Very important to remember this based around this correlation. Now, we're going to go into our final pair here. We're going to go into Great Britain US. Now, using our medium-term indicators here, sorry, I'm just going to pull this up so everybody can see. First, we're going to run through our Great Britain US on its own first. Now, medium-term crossover, again, what we're going to do is we're going to go into our properties. Again, I know it's somewhat repetitive, but it is highly useful to do this. We go into our triple EMA crossover. We can very clearly see that we had this triple EMA cross to the upside, only to very sharply reverse lower. Now, we have no buy signal here whatsoever on this British pound US dollar, but again, even though all our crossovers are pointing to the downside, in this particular case we're going to add two additional indicators from Vantage Point. We're going to add the predicted RSI and the predicted MACD to see if we're getting into oversold territory. Now, looking at this, we can see that we clearly are. The predicted MACD and the predicted RSI has actually come out of oversold territory and is sitting at neutral levels. This predicted MACD is obviously a concern for me, looking at the way that this thing is moving, where this thing is positioned right now, suggests that Great Britain US is going to bounce higher. Now, what I can do from this point is I can go in and have a look and see if my short-term indicator is at all supporting that extremely oversold signal. So what I'm going to do is hit the short-term indicator from Vantage Point, and we can actually see that it is supporting that. We can see that even though that we have all our crossovers to the downside, the short-term has crossed over the 5-day simple moving average, suggesting that Great Britain US is going to go higher in the short term. So counter trend longs may be pretty good. Now I'm going to hit the medium-term crossover, and we can see that we have absolutely no crossover here whatsoever. So in the short term, based on what we've seen here, I'm just going to put this back on so everybody can see it. Now I'm going to clear this again so everyone can see that also. The predicted MACD is bottoming out in heavily oversold territory, and we have a short-term crossover from vantage point to the upside. This suggests in the short term, not the medium and the long term, but in the short term, that Great Britain US is going to move higher. So that's very important to remember that to start the week, that counter trend longs on Great Britain US could work out quite well. However, we also want to make sure that based on this analysis that we get out of those positions once we've booked some profit. So I hope everybody's enjoyed this slight little change here to the Forex market outlook for the week, but I want to thank everybody for sending in emails and asking questions, how I come up with my analysis, and what other markets do I use with Vantage Point going forward. So I'll certainly add the split screen going forward into the future webinars, just so everybody can see the correlation and help give further indication of what certain markets are doing. So again, my name is Greg Furman, market analyst here at TraderPlanet.com, and I want to thank everybody for viewing this.